They laughed when I mentioned my startup. At my father's 65th birthday dinner, surrounded by doctors, lawyers, and real success stories, my mother said, "We don't mention that IT thing. It confuses the older guests." But across the table, one person didn't laugh. Sophie, my brother's fiancée, HorizonTech's regional strategy director. She recognized me, not as Simon's sister, but as the CEO of the healthcare platform her company was secretly trying to acquire for $218 million. My name is Lena Ehrenberg. I'm 32. And for most of my life, I was the other one in a family of overachievers. My father, Dr. Klaus Ehrenberg, is a renowned heart surgeon in Nuremberg. My mother, Dr. Marianne Ehrenberg, a fierce medical lawyer who practically breathes litigation. And my older brother Simon followed their path, straight into medicine, straight into glory. Me? I chose code, logic, not to rebel, but to build something I wish had existed the night my grandmother died due to a hospital error. They didn't see it. They didn't want to. So I stopped trying to explain. And instead, I built quietly, relentlessly, until the thing they all dismissed became the one thing their world couldn't ignore. If you've ever been silenced by the people who claim to know what's best for you, if you've ever been called too idealistic, too impractical, or not one of us, stay. Because this isn't just a story about revenge, it's about redefinition. And the day the price of underestimating me was $218 million. The table sparkled with crystal and silverware, carefully arranged for my father's 65th birthday, his jubilee of precision, as he liked to call it. The restaurant sat at the edge of the old town in Nuremberg, all vaulted ceilings and candlelight, with menus that didn't list prices, because if you had to ask, you shouldn't be there. I shouldn't have been there, not because I didn't belong, but because I already knew how the evening would go. There would be praise, applause for Simon, my brother, the newly appointed cardiac fellow at Universitäts Klinikum München, and for my mother, Dr. Marianne Ehrenberg, who just won another malpractice case. And of course, for my father, who built an entire department from nothing and made the name Ehrenberg synonymous with surgical excellence in Bavaria. Then, inevitably, someone asked about me. "Still playing with that app of yours?" Aunt Renate chimed, her voice syrupy with condescension. My father laughed. Not cruelly, just carelessly. "She's between things, trying to build something," he said, as if something was a mild illness I'd recover from. My mother sipped her wine. "We don't mention the IT stuff. It confuses the older guests." There it was, my erasure, delivered with linen napkins and vintage Riesling. But across the table, one person didn't laugh. Sophie, my brother's fiancée. Her gaze lingered just a second too long, calculating, almost cautious. Then she smiled, politely, and turned back to Simon. No one noticed the tension behind her eyes, but I did, because I recognized that look. I'd seen it once before. At a pitch meeting, right before a VC realized he'd underestimated us and tried to hide the shift in power behind a smile. That night, I didn't say a word, but I knew, with quiet certainty, that something had changed. Not in my family, but in the room. And this time, I wasn't the only one holding a secret. The night after the birthday dinner, I couldn't sleep. Not because of what they said, but because of what I didn't say. There was a time I used to explain myself. I'd bring mock-ups home, printouts of early UI flows, data on interdepartmental miscommunication in clinics. I thought if I made the problem real enough, they'd understand why I cared, why it mattered. I still remember the last time I tried. It was after Oma Hilda, my grandmother, was hospitalized for a routine procedure and almost died because 2 departments logged conflicting medications into incompatible systems. She slipped into a coma for 3 days. No one was sued. No one was fired. The hospital simply called it a documentation misalignment. I stayed up that whole week reading white papers, sketching out potential solutions. I even presented them to my father at breakfast. He didn't look up from his tea. That's IT territory, Lena. Let the tech people handle tech. You should focus on something more serious, something structured, medicine, law. That was when I stopped arguing and started building. I declined my university's medtech placement offer and quietly enrolled in a postgraduate track in systems architecture in Erlangen. Far enough from Nuremberg to be invisible, close enough to still feel like a betrayal. It was there I met Ismail Altun, brilliant, dry-witted, and nursing a personal vendetta of his own. His uncle had died due to a record mix-up at a regional clinic. We spoke the same language: logic, loss, and the ache of being told, "You're too emotional," for wanting systems that don't kill people. We didn't wait for permission. We started drawing on the walls of his parents' basement, fueled by late-night donor and stubbornness. We called it Meteoris. No capital, no advisors. Just 2 rejected minds and a problem that wouldn't leave us alone. They thought I was wandering, but really, I was drafting blueprints for a future they never imagined. And maybe I left home in silence, but I didn't leave empty. The early years of Meteoris passed like a long winter. We had no budget, no roadmap, just caffeine, old secondhand monitors, and one shared certainty. If we didn't build this, no one would, and people would keep dying quietly. There were weeks when Ismail and I lived off leftover burek from his aunt's bakery. We showered at the campus gym, coded from dawn to dusk, and pitched to investors in borrowed jackets with shoes that didn't match. We were invisible, and for once, that invisibility worked in our favor. It gave us time, space, freedom from expectation, and it helped me disappear from the Ehrenberg narrative completely. To my family, I'd become a kind of background glitch, mentioned vaguely in Christmas cards as working in tech. the way you might describe someone managing a parking app or automating spreadsheets. Meanwhile, we were installing our beta version in 3 pilot clinics, then 7, then 24. Our first major deal came from a regional hospital chain in Hessen. We signed a $440,000 contract, enough to move out of the basement and into a real office above a Turkish bookstore in Berlin. I kept a low profile, deliberately. No interviews, no company headshots. On paper, I was L. Ehrenberg, CTO and co-founder. No photo, no links. Even our press kits used Ismail's voice as the face of Meteoris. It wasn't insecurity. It was self-preservation. Because somewhere deep down, I knew if they found out too early, they'd try to reshape it, rewrite it, turn it into a family win. And I didn't want Meteoris to be their redemption story. I wanted it to be mine. So I stayed silent. Even when our hospital coverage expanded to 192 clinics across 3 countries. Even when a Scandinavian fund wired $6.8 million into our account after a 9-minute pitch. When my father texted me once to ask if I could help him set up some cloud thing, I replied politely. Then went back to drafting an internal audit protocol to reduce medication errors by 37%. They thought I'd vanished, but I was simply building, under their radar, and far, far above their expectations. I arrived exactly on time, not early enough to help with flower placements, not late enough to draw attention, just perfectly forgettable. Exactly how I wanted it. The villa sat on the edge of the lake, minimalist and gleaming, just like Sophie. It was HorizonTech's event space, apparently. A subtle flex for a not-so-subtle occasion. Simon's engagement dinner. He looked handsome, confident. Everything my parents had hoped I would be. Sophie stood beside him in a navy silk jumpsuit, the picture of corporate polish. Her smile was flawless. So was her memory. She glanced at me once. No recognition. Or rather, too much. It was the same look I'd seen across the boardroom table when someone realized they were sitting across from the person they thought they were hunting. Dinner began like every Ehrenberg celebration. Simon, center stage, my parents glowing with pride, and me, seated near the edge, between a cousin who thought I worked in IT support and a family friend who asked if I was still finding myself. I smiled, sipped my Riesling, waited. Between courses, a guest brought up Horizon's latest acquisition rumor. Some Berlin-based medtech, they said. Something with a weird name. Med something? Sophie cleared her throat gently. Meteoris, she said, her tone deliberate. We've been following them closely. Simon leaned in. Sounds like something Lena would know about. Sophie turned to me. Calm, measured. Then, she should. She built it. Silence. Not the kind that falls, it lands. Heavy. Audible. shattering. I didn't flinch. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, pressed play. She's a ghost founder. No family. No board loyalty. We can push the price lower. Sophie's voice, recorded in a strategy call, filled the table. Simon's jaw tensed. My mother's hand froze midair, clutching her wine glass. My father blinked, slow, like someone waking into a room they thought they owned. I looked directly at Sophie. You recognized me at the last strategy review, didn't you? And said nothing, because you thought silence would give you leverage. She said nothing now, too, but this time everyone else heard it. They asked for brunch, not a confrontation, not an apology, just brunch, at a corner cafe across from my father's hospital. Neutral ground, as if we were colleagues meeting to discuss a project. I almost didn't go. But some truths are too heavy to leave unsaid forever. They were already seated when I arrived. My mother in pearls, her posture as composed as ever. My father scrolling something on his phone, probably a medical journal, or pretending to. Lena, he said, standing halfway like he wasn't sure if we were hugging. We weren't. The silence stretched just long enough to sting. My mother opened with practiced warmth. We've been reading about Meteoris, the funding rounds, the clinic partnerships. It's impressive. But why didn't you share any of it with us? I smiled politely, stirred cream into my coffee. Because the last time I tried, you told me to apply for an admin job answering phones. Her face tightened. My father jumped in. That's not fair. We were trying to help. No, I said, gently. You were trying to fix something that wasn't broken. The words landed quietly. No raised voices, no dramatics. Just a silence too dense to breathe through. My mother inhaled slowly. We didn't understand. Tech always felt unstable, risky. Law and medicine, they're structured. Exactly, I said. That's what scared you. I chose something you couldn't control. My father folded his hands on the table. But you've clearly succeeded. We always knew you were bright. You knew what you wanted me to be, I corrected. That's not the same as knowing who I am. The waiter interrupted, mercifully, with bread and coffee refills. We let the silence sit. Eventually, I looked at both of them. I wasn't lost. I just wasn't yours to direct anymore. My mother looked away, blinking fast. My father just nodded, slowly. Not in agreement, exactly, but in recognition. The reckoning had come, not with anger, but with clarity. And that was enough. 6 weeks later, the deal closed. HorizonTech acquired Meteoris in full, $218 million. with a condition I had personally inserted and refused to budge on. I would remain head of innovation, autonomous, unreplaceable, and reporting directly to the board. Sophie was quietly moved to another portfolio. No press release mentioned the engagement. Simon didn't bring it up either when he came by my flat one Friday with a bottle of Dornfelder and a box of badly frosted pastries. "I tried baking," he said sheepishly. "It went sideways." We sat on the floor, like we used to as kids. No performance, no applause. Just two siblings, facing the quiet that comes after everything breaks, and some things survive. "I should have asked," he said, finally. "Years ago." "You weren't the only one," I said. "But you're the only one here now." He lifted his glass. "To the black sheep." I clinked mine gently. "To the sheep that built the system." And we laughed, softly, genuinely. Not because everything was fine, but because finally, someone saw it. My office now overlooks the Spree in Berlin. Glass walls, clean lines. We host monthly dinners for young women in STEM. I don't teach them code. I teach them resilience. One of them, a 17-year-old from Chemnitz, once asked me, "Do you ever wish they had believed in you sooner?" I paused, thought of my mother's silence at brunch, my father's slow nod, of Simon sitting on my floor, not as a doctor, but as a brother. "Sometimes," I admitted, "it would have made things easier. But maybe it would have made me softer too." She didn't fully understand, but one day she will. Because when no one claps for your idea, when the room goes silent instead of loud, you learn to build something no one can take from you. And in that quiet, you stop waiting to be seen. You become the mirror and let them finally see themselves. Have you ever been underestimated by the very people who were supposed to believe in you? Did you stay quiet? Or did you prove them wrong in your own way? Share your story below. This space is for the ones who built in silence, who turned doubt into design, and who never waited to be chosen. I'm reading, and so are others, the ones still building.